We've got a packed agenda today, so I think perhaps in the interest of time, we'll get started. Welcome to this TMI webinar, The Road to Centralized Payments, in partnership with Serrala. I'm Ben Poole from TMI's editorial team, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Wolf, Senior Managing Director, Treasury Services at Serrala, Rohan Chadha, Vice President Finance and Assistant Treasurer at RTX, Michael Dillon, Assistant Treasurer at Sun Chemical, and Christine Wang, Principal Corporation Treasury at Chevron Corporation. Now, before we kick off our packed conversation today, we want to hear from you all in the audience via a quick poll that is going to pop up on your screens right now. So we really are interested in finding out where your organization is on the payment centralization journey today. So we've got several options for you, from mostly decentralized with payments managed locally, some centralization, mainly around cash pooling or liquidity visibility, centralized payments or POBO in selected regions and entities, mature in-house bank payment factory model, or option E, currently redesigning or migrating our model, or F, not sure / exploring options, which I think would be an interesting thing to come out with today. Peter, anything you're expecting from this poll in terms of where it might go, or is it?
I think this is still an area that companies are diving into. So I think we're going to probably find some that are still working their way into that and aren't really fully matured yet, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we've got three different stories coming up from our corporate panelists as well, which will be fascinating. But maybe we can have a look at the final results if they're ready. Okay, so we've got a bit of a mix. I think coming in first is the mature in-house bank payment factory model, 29%, 24% are on centralized payments or POBO. So some quite good maturity there. On the other side, we've got 18% on mostly decentralized. Anything that kind of stands out there off the top, Peter?
Yeah, no, that's pretty nice. 30% with the mature in-house banking payment factory model. That's a pretty substantial percentage there.
Yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
we have a good audience that's ready to talk about and listen to topics that they appear to be already deep into.
Yeah, so you and the Serrala Treasury Services team have been working with large multinational organizations such as our three represented here today, RTX, Sun Chemical, and Chevron, for over 2 decades, helping them design and evolve centralized payments and in-house banking operating models. So before we get into the company specifics, how should Treasury teams think about centralized payments at a strategic level?
Well, I think first of all, surprisingly, maybe it's that the conversation doesn't or shouldn't start really with payments itself. The companies that are successful don't really start there. They start with the discussion and consideration of business strategy. So centralized payments model is really the output of a bigger decision, a bigger discussion, and namely, how does Treasury want to function? How does the Office of the CFO actually want to operate?
Mhm.
And it's really after you have that decision that you are in a position to look at the operating model design tied together with the technical design as a cohesive discussion, really, because they are heavily dependent on one another, and they really need to be looked at in parallel, not in sequence, to
Mhm.
ensure that you understand the implications of one or the other. If you look at this, either one independently, the operating model or the technology, and you try to design that independently, what you can end up with is a solution that can't be supported by the other component. So there's no real single right answer here. There's a
Mhm.
wide variety, and we'll get into that, as you said in the discussion here. But there are 5 or 6 models, I'd say, out there that are effective, that we see in place, and nuances, lots of nuances between them. But the companies that struggle are the ones that don't take that intentional design aspect. And really,
Mhm.
it's ultimately, you have to be deliberate about design. You have to bring the technology together in the conversation with the operating model, and really accept that that model might be different than your peers. It's very unique to you, your DNA, your organization.
Yeah, I mean, just to dig into that a little bit further, do companies sometimes make that mistake of treating centralized payments as one fixed model when the right answer really depends on, the business structure, the data, the governance, their operating priorities?
For sure. That's really one of the most common mistakes is that we see is that, again, as I mentioned, a real spectrum of solutions. On one end, you have coordinated decentralized models where the individual entities pay on their own behalf, but Treasury sets the policy and gets the visibility. On the other end, you have the fully extreme, mature, true payment factories, in-house banking solutions where everything is processed for those entities centrally. And then you have in between these hybrid models where they're set up by region or payment method or currency or by business unit. And so what really drives is there are four components that drive, or four factors that drive the decision there. It's the business structure, the governance maturity, the data maturity, and the operating priorities. That those four components together decide what direction you're going, or where you need to, how you need to build that solution. The mistake is really looking at this as a binary choice, either centralized or not centralized. And it's much more nuanced than that. And the value really comes in the nuance set up down in the weeds. That's where you get the true value for the organization set up for your particular needs.
Excellent. Okay, let's get into how our companies have gone about matching the model to the business. I'd like to bring Rohan in here. When we spoke last week, Rohan, you made the point that companies should not start with the tool. They need to start with the nature of the business, the strategy, and what Treasury is trying to achieve. So I'm curious as to how that applies in a large multi-business organization such as RTX.
Yeah, look, I agree to Peter a lot, and I think we have done a similar approach. I mean, look, the two spectrum that you need to look at. First, what is your business operating model? If you are a business which is fairly decentralized with regions and business lines operating in a decentralized manner with their own ERPs and systems, you would probably not try to design everything which is too centralized. It will be too expensive to go and implement everything across and might be too disruptive to the way the business operates. Whereas if you have a business which is tightly integrated, largely operates out of one or a couple of ERPs, harmonious processes across, it's easier to implement and may be desirable to have centralization there. For us, the answer lies somewhere in the middle, right? For us, the thing is that there are aspects which needs to be closer to where the action is. So, processing of payment, making sure that they can cater to their vendors and requirements locally well, with a good oversight and control mechanism in place. And then certain aspects are centralized, like banking. Which banks they bank, liquidity management, core infrastructure, those are centralized, right? You kind of want to make sure you have the adequate control. The second aspect, which I think Peter briefly touched upon and we talked about as well in our journey, is what is Treasury's role? And what are the key risks that Treasury is trying to mitigate, right? So if Treasury is trying to mitigate a risk on fraud, duplicate payment, as CFO is looking for Treasury to kind of play that role, then you want to have a more centralized structure, right? You want to make sure that everything is going to a centralized model. You can monitor all the payments, make sure nothing is going wrong there. But if Treasury's role is to make sure everybody has the right funding and then define the policy and control the bank and everything else, then you might do away with more of a hybrid model, whereas some of these things can be in the business unit, right? So those are the trade-offs. Those are the right trade-offs. And to Peter's point, you got to make that decision before you start the journey, and you need to continue to evaluate your, approach as you go through, because organizations change and, circumstances change in the business as well. So that's what I would say as how we approach it, right?
So are there any kind of, I suppose, key principles in how you decide what should be centralized and what can remain closer to the business, or is it a kind of case by case basis?
So first is there are some non-negotiables and core kind of philosophies we have. One and culture. One is we have a very strong policy framework, right, which both all the business units and corporate kind of run and participate in. So so that's one. There's a very strong compliance culture that is driven from the top, right? So it makes sure that everybody thinks about compliance as one of their key responsibilities as a job. And then we have a strong audit and assurance function, right? All these three things as our core pillars gives us the confidence that we can leave the day-to-day processing of the payments with the businesses, right? Because everybody is subject to those three kind of core principles. They operate well, and we are able to govern and check that. Then there are certain elements of things which are centralized because it makes sense for us to centralize those. So, for example, the four key components there we have centralized. One is bank and banking infrastructure, right? So, which bank we'll bank with? There's a list there. Obviously, everybody in Treasury kind of maintains a list of preferred banks, right, with whom they get the credit. So, which bank will bank in which country and which jurisdiction? What will be the legal framework, agreement framework with that bank? A core infrastructure for Swift and other kind of gateways. We don't want people to be spending multiple times the same cost over and over again in the company on building that infrastructure. Now we are working with actually in partnership with Serrala and SAP to enhance that infrastructure to include now MBC and APM from SAP, which will help us even get better there. So that's number two. Number three is a centralized liquidity management. Treasury kind of manages all the cash, so we need to have access to the visibility of that data, etc., and that's very important for us. So that's number three. Number four is intercompany payment. We don't want to spend too much money on intercompany payments, and that's why we have a very mature, sophisticated netting in-house bank, which then takes all the transactions from all the businesses, does a multilateral netting, uses current account as well as cash movement to settle those intercompanies, and we are able to drive a lot of outcome in terms of cost, etc. from that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rohan. Michael, let me bring you in now. I mean, you've just heard Rohan describe how RTX is tailoring the model to the business. What would you add from your perspective, from Sun Chemicals' experience, about deciding how far Treasury ownership should go?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic, and it's a little tough to follow Peter and Rohan. But in many of the areas, I agree wholeheartedly with all the different elements they spoke to. Rohan spoke directly to a lot of the things that we looked at. So I'm going to take a slightly different view on how I think one of the things to be approached is playing the long game. So I always consider where wallet share goes when it comes to technology spend and it comes to business support. And I think for us, we're no different. And usually Treasury sits in that space. I think it's something we're all accustomed to about being kind of, I won't say the redheaded stepchild, but definitely not the favorite. And so I think play the long game. When we looked to the choice from a technology platform, we partnered and coupled with what our manufacturing team was doing. And so in an SAP environment, that maybe didn't give us some of the flexibility that other tools would provide, but it put us at the table for technology as it evolved. And we weren't then going to be sitting on the outside. And so I think it also allowed us to profess that partnership. That there are times where there's going to be some movements and upgrades and other things that will happen. And I think the message of saying we're a partner, we'll take a little bit of pain and maybe not exactly what we want, but the integration will be there, the simplification for a lot of the things that are happening, the translation into our business world, into our financial controllers and our business leaders of what's going on. It all roots back to a system that they're familiar with. And so you're not throwing curveballs and learning curves and all the other things at them. And I think really to Rohan's point on the move topic, we look at it and we said, challenge everything. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we would go to a site and we would hear, it's the way we've always done it. It's the way we have to do it. Or heaven forbid, legally we're required. And I always kind of sat back with a little coy approach where it was like, okay, tell me it's legally required, and now give me the document showing that it is legally required. And a week later, the user would come back and say, well, it's not really legally required. And those are the sort of things where it's the buffers, the natural buffers that people put up. So I think to Rohan's point, when you have the right design, when you have the right structure based on what the commercial needs are, where the business is going, and what Treasury needs for the maximization of liquidity management and also the maximizing our risk management sides, I think at that point in time, you find yourself with a template that you can push and be a little more confident with. At the end of the day, it still comes down to senior level support. So you have to be able to be the champion that says why this is the right thing for the organization. And again, when you play the long game, the idea there is you're saying, I'm giving a little bit because it's the right thing for the organization. I'm asking for a little bit because it's the right thing for the organization.
And Sun Chemical has taken a very integrated approach. You've said before that in simple terms, if it touches the bank statement, then Treasury owns it. So what does that actually mean in practice to you?
Yeah, so we went a little bit further than many of my colleagues would, which is we in our journey to shared services in operating primarily in Latin America, North America, and EMEA. At that point in time, now we've expanded into Asia Pacific at this point, but what we looked at is we said we feel more confident in that taking the end-to-end approach of cash allocation, so receipts coming in, whether for a customer side or whether they're for miscellaneous items or whether they're for standard treasury items, all the way through to disbursements, all the way through to even supplier level disbursements, allowed us then to say, if we have our hand in that and functionally those items roll up, where in most organizations those stay within the accounting department, we roll those up within the treasury team. And that gives us, again, if I go back to my original theme, a little bit of skin in the game and the ability to say we're a partner here. So now when we're sitting talking about where there's opportunities to merge in divisions and do some other things that are wise from an SG&A perspective, we're able to speak to those. But on top of that, from a treasury side, we're usually going to be a little bit more forward leaning. And I say that hoping that none of my colleagues see a copy of this video, but they're very talented at what they do, but they don't always look on that forward side to it. Treasury will do that, which means we're going to be looking and saying, how can we be better tomorrow than we are today in both receipts, disbursements, risk mitigation, and so forth. So we made the decision to go all the way down to a business level at a very, very detailed level. And the traditional treasury side says that's just too much noise. And there's a lot of noise that comes. So you have to have the right appetite for that, if it's the right thing for your organization, the right support and right appetite to be at that level of detail where you really are putting yourself on the front line to the very much commercial team, which is not always the easiest thing. So there's a question of commitment, but we felt we could deliver the better overall product by being fully integrated, leveraging treasury technology, leveraging the different tools and technology that's coming out there on cash management, because things are moving just too fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michael. Christine, I'd love to bring you in at this point to give us our third corporate perspective. Chevron has also operated a mature in-house banking and payment factory model for many years, but your journey is different again. So how would you characterize Chevron's approach to centralized payments? And where does it sit compared with the integrated Sun Chemical model and the hybrid RTX model that we've heard about so far?
Yeah, I think in general, we're all in agreement that the treasury function, it needs to be centrally managed on down to protect the cash, to partner with the business. That's the big tenets of treasury. So our journeys aren't too different from a broader perspective, but I'd say we started our journey on centralized payments back in the early 2000s. So where we were in that time, we had just acquired Texaco. We were in the midst of integrating Unical. And so you could just imagine being able to integrate all these worldwide organizations. And Treasury's perspective is to be able to have visibility into that cash and know where the cash is going. We needed to really buckle down on how to handle payments, because to us, that's one of the most critical functions within the finance function. So what we saw also at that time was we were migrating our a number of our U.S. Functional areas into a managed service center in Manila. So I want to say that Chevron was an early adopter of broad centralization activities. So at the same time of these large integrations, we were also standing up a shared service center in Manila. So the third piece that came together also was the in-house cash product of SAP. That gave us then a foundation to be able to, within our accounting systems, be able to manage our cash disbursements as well. So with these parts coming together, we partnered with Peter at the time, and he helped us design a U.S. pay on behalf of structure that really has been one of the key successes of how we've managed our our payables over the past 20 years. So it all falls in line with, again, our overall Chevron approach of centrally managing our cash operations and being able to centralize and standardize how we approach processes. I think we're all, as Treasury professionals, also wanting to make sure we're doing so in as both as a cost-effective manner, but also in a way that we know that the cash is being protected and how it goes out. So Rohan mentioned about fraud and making sure that we have the controls in process. And we like the fact that centralization of payments, it drives down your bank accounts. I mean, the fewer egresses out, the fewer opportunities, the more eyes are on one or two bank accounts to be able to make sure that we're not duplicating payments, that other accounts out locally, they may have crossed over and inadvertently paid out two of the same invoices. So we've really liked our centralization journey because it's moved along with the progression of how our business has grown in the US and overseas as well.
Yeah, that fraud point is fascinating, I think. Just before we have our second poll for you all to vote in, I wanted to ask Peter, you've obviously sat at the design table for many of these journeys across very different industries, and we've just heard these approaches from RTX, Sun Chemical and Chevron. So from your experience, Peter, what are the 2 or 3 patterns that consistently separate organizations that get this right from those that can potentially stall?
Sure. What strikes me listening to all 3 of them talk and knowing their solutions is how different the models are in many ways, but that they all have the same underlying success factors that are the foundation. And what are those success factors? Really, one that stands out very clearly is the clarity of design intent. As you heard each one of them speak, they spoke very eloquently, very clearly about what the objective of their treasury operation is. They understand what their objective is. And that's at the foundation of everything that they've built out. So Rohan with the selective centralization, Sun with the hardcore, strict centralized payments, and Chevron with a very centralized model as well. But it's all based on clarity of what they need. With RTX, they have a very conglomerate-oriented structure, and their structure demands that kind of flexibility. Whereas Sun, for example, is smaller, tighter, more tightly interwoven, integrated. So their solution, having the tight centralized payments, gives them the capability to have that confidence in process, the clarity and control. So it's really about what, as we said earlier, what is your organization required? The second is that integrated execution. I think companies that look at this bring those component pieces together, the technology and the operating model, as we said, don't look at those separately. They look at them together, understanding that they have to work together successfully, because if you have an operating model that can't be supported by the technology, it's not going to work. And if you don't design your technology to support the operating model appropriately or optimize it, you're not going to get the end result you need. It's the orchestration of bringing them all together at the same time. Now, you have to intelligently sequence them, the data, the technology, the operating model, and the technology, but bringing them together under one umbrella is really critical to make sure you think about all the interconnections. And then the final one I would say is sponsorship. In each of these organizations, they have very strong sponsorship. You need a CFO level sponsor because you're dealing with AP, AR, cash, accounting, reporting, controls, tax, everybody. And so if you don't have that C-level commitment and strong support, it's very hard to drive this kind of project. You need that support. Plus, you need good partnership with the CIO's department, and the entities that understand this and drive forward with that kind of relationship are the ones that are successful. The ones that are stalled or have trouble are really where you see the Treasury Department heroically out there by themselves trying to drive a project without that support. And those are challenge projects to achieve objectives.
Well, that tees us up very nicely for our next poll question, which will be coming up on your screens very shortly. This poll is looking at what the biggest barrier, in your opinion, is to further payment centralization in your organization. So I'll just run through the options that you've got here. Is the biggest barrier data readiness or data quality? Is it the operating model or process ownership? Perhaps it's governance or stakeholder alignment, maybe legacy technology or ERP constraints, perhaps bank connectivity complexity, or is it funding and resource constraints, or not currently a priority? So have a think what the biggest barrier to getting further on your journey is. Let us know by clicking the poll button. And Peter, does it really depend on the organization, or overall, are there any specific trends you're seeing here? Which is a mean question to throw at you.
Yeah, there are definitely trends. The data is critical here, and especially when you talk about bringing different ERP systems together, which a lot of the times you're dealing with large organizations and companies that are constantly changing, morphing, acquiring. Being able to manage the processes requires that the data is clean, but the data has to be aligned with the operating model, the direction, the target model you're going to use. So you can't do that in isolation either. So
yeah,
but that is foundational to, I think, many or most of these projects.
Well, let's have a look at the final results if we can. Yeah. Okay. So legacy technology or ERP constraints is kind of the main barrier at the moment. A lot of companies, I suppose, wrestling with their digitization and trying to perhaps leap from those legacy platforms that 20 years ago were in place, and not much has been changed since then. Any surprises in there for you, Peter?
No, actually, I think that the biggest constraint is really the technology and really awareness. I think too, these kinds of sessions I think are critical. Surprising, this has been around for 20 years, right? The topic in the early 2000s when Christine, unfortunately, I was on that original project, 2004 or something. It's embarrassing, but that was a second major in-house banking project in the United States with SAP. We had worked on Microsoft. So they were definitely a very early adopter. Since then, technology's changed a lot, but the conversation seems to have been much slower keeping up with that in the industry. And I think the awareness now, the more awareness companies see the strategic advantage of these structures and the cost savings, operational, executional efficiency and controls, they're tremendous. So we are seeing more of that movement, and the technology is certainly there to be able to support it.
Yeah, it's not embarrassing, it's experience, Peter. That's the important thing. Okay, let's get on to implementation lessons. Christine, I'd love to come back to you on this in terms of at Chevron. You've obviously already completed the move to S/4HANA and are now transforming the solution with SAP's next generation Treasury capabilities and advanced payment management. So what did that sequencing teach you about data readiness, governance, and protecting a stable operating model while modernizing?
Let me first just clarify that Chevron is on our S/4HANA journey. It's going to be multiple years. But what we deliberately did, and Peter, I loved how you used the word deliberate. We deliberately decided that our U.S. payments factory, our U.S. POBO, would move first before any other U.S. operations. So the actual functional activity of running our payments factory would go first into S/4HANA. Mm-hmm. Because our operations are actually in three different SAP ECC environments, we said we have a choice. We either have to do it first or we have to do it last after all our U.S. ops have migrated. We said the payments are just too critical, too material on a daily basis to wait. Who knows how long our US journey would have been, or our overall journey would have been. So it went in last year in 2024, 2 years ago in 2024. And what it did was it taught us a lot about what we need to do on data. We found that was the largest lesson learned, was data cleansing. Because our data was sitting in three different systems, it was kind of like a wild, wild west of how data standards were in each of the boxes. So in migrating the data into S/4HANA, we had to standardize across these three boxes and be very deliberate with our governance structure on data standards. We had to stand up exactly what for the payment methods, for the bank master data, all of that. And it really paid dividends during our cutover, our conversion. So the master data came over so cleanly because of the very deep planning we did to standardize. And I'll also say that as the first US entity that went into S/4HANA, we have since brought in our US exploration and productions business, pretty sizable piece of our overall business. We brought that in last year. Mm-hmm. And the payments integration went off with a breeze because we had already been deliberate in setting up our payments factory. So from a lessons learned, that's another key one, is where you have to bring together your disparate systems, really focus on your data cleansing. And if it goes across, maybe look to do that activity first rather than in piecemeal, because then you get it right the first time and everything follows along. So that was a big thing, Peter, in partnering with you all, that we really, really learned a lot on how to bring our data together. Because the tool itself, the SAP process, very standard, very few customization with, and we were able to reduce a good number of custom programs we had because of the S/4HANA capabilities. So just really good partnership there.
Thanks, Christine. And don't forget, if you're watching, you can drop a question to any of our panel using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Michael, let's bring you back in. When Treasury gets the opportunity to invest in its operating model, how do you think teams can ensure that they use that window well, particularly when they need to translate Treasury priorities into language that the wider business and tech teams can actually act on?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that I'm known for is redundancy, so please bear with me. But really, I think collaboration is critical for me. I'm big on collaboration and I'm big on partnerships. Effectively, you have to put the personal agendas aside. And professionally, I think we all try and strive for that, but I think that's a fundamental. So there's two things then that I think really come into play more than others. The link to the stakeholder, having a seat at the table internally is critical. And that goes back to what I said from the start is in a negotiation, it can't all be one side. And you've got to come to the table and say, I'm willing to give a little bit for others if I can have a little bit back on my side. So the seat at the table is critical. The other thing that's very critical is having the right people, the right talent in place. We have a mix of talent. So we don't focus just on a finance treasury background. We have some individuals have an accounting background too, so they're able to talk the talk and walk the walk. Myself personally, I started in the accounting side, so I can work with our controllers and have those discussions, and even all the way up to the CFO explaining why maybe it's the right thing to do. But having the right people, the right talent in your portfolio to help the mission. It can't just be individuals who say, my job starts here and it stops there. In a company our size, you have to be diverse. Along with that, those individuals have to be talented in communicating, and communicating goes beyond just internally in the organization. Attend conferences, web-based items like what we're doing today, open the venue for people to learn, to understand, and to say, well, is that really possible? It's kind of the art of the possible question. Networking, really relationships matter. They matter a lot in these topics because it's that little bit of knowledge that somebody says, oh, when we were going through our journey, how were you able to pull money out of Poland? And I won't say who it was, but it was somebody significantly larger than us who asked that question. And we were able to sit down with them and explain how we had done it. The reality is it's not, you can't take for granted all the different things and the different sizes and so forth. It's really a question of talent. And along that journey, one of the other things I think is important, the lessons that we've learned is by having the centralized component as robust as it is, as we start now on our S4 journey, it is a much tighter transition. I won't say easy, nothing in the world's easy, but we aren't looking to win over stakeholders in every country about the changes they need to make. We are saying, this is the model, we are making the transition, and this is how we're going. That allows our IT team and our business to focus on what is really our core task as a company, which is to produce products for our customer. So they can focus on that, which is a relief to them, while we are able to bring them a solution that's a little bit easier to integrate. And again, that takes me back to the start. Big on collaboration, partnership, and actually being somebody that says, hey, how do we make this work for the better of everybody?
Thanks, Michael. Rohan, in a large organization like RTX, how do governance and stakeholder alignment shape what's possible, and especially when some activities are centralized while others remain within the business?
Look, that is key for success. It's one of the foundational elements for success because, to Michael's point, still there is a shared understanding of what the goals and objectives are and who does what. It'll not create an environment where everybody is moving in one direction, right? So from our perspective, there are three key elements of it. One, I talked about it earlier, we have a very robust policy framework. Now, that framework of policy is important because it comes from the top, so it kind of provides the relevant, a message to the organization. But more importantly, that policy framework relies on a council that has a representation from both the corporate and the business side, so that we create balanced policies, right? Balanced policies which are based on the reality, and those people who are participating in that are also responsible for implementing it on both sides, right? So that way is you try to drive that collaboration and connection, the start of the process, right? The second element is just the alignment on the operating model, understanding the roles and responsibilities. A lot of time the debate happens where people don't understand the operating model or don't understand what the roles and responsibilities are. The third is also the alignment on what will be the common core that we will not negotiate on, right? So for us, the common cores are, banks, which banks you will bank on. Common cores are what kind of infrastructure you will use. There is an approved list of infrastructure that can be used, or certain things has to come through a proper infrastructure in corporate so we can manage and mitigate risk like improper payments, right? What will be the infrastructure for, or what will be the common core for accessing data? Treasury needs to access data to manage liquidity, right? So those three elements, from our perspective, keeps that governance and stakeholder alignment, in a good place for us to be successful.
Peter, from your experience across the organizations that you've worked with, where do these initiatives most often succeed or fail? Operating model, data foundations, governance, the technology itself? I mean, there's lots of different areas we've spoken about today.
Sure. All four of those dimensions really matter. They're all critical. In practice, they tend to fail together more than they fail individually. The programs that stall, that have challenges, they almost never run into one of these issues in isolation. It's really more the seams, how they come together, that integration across the four. So let me give you a concrete kind of more definition of this. So you can have a very thoughtful operating model. We've been talking about that. It's critical to the solution. You can have a reasonably clean set of data. You can have strong governance, and you can have best-in-class technology, S/4HANA, advanced payment management, Serrala's finance platform. You can have all of those things, and still you can have a program that struggles and underperforms. Why is that? It's because when you look under the covers, what you find is that the operating model wasn't faithfully translated into the configuration of the system in the technology, or the data wasn't cleansed with the right operating end target in mind. Those things are critical. They drive what is the detail that matters, right? The governance model could have assumed, or sometimes assumes, that the processes, certain process flows are there that the business thought they would have, but the technology couldn't support those process flows. Again, all these things need to be considered tightly interwoven. So ultimately, the individual pieces in those situations were fine. It was the marriage of bringing them together that was problematic, that leads to that underperformance. And so in a platform like this, in a model like this, design, transformation of Treasury, you really need to bring those things all together and design a solution that's comprehensive. And the gap, it's almost always in the translation of the business requirements into the technology, the technical consideration or technical solution. And those companies that understand both the business intent or the business intent and the technology, that they have the depth of resources to be able to address those. You have to have people that fully understand the business and fully understand the technology to bring them together successfully. Because if you don't, you're building a system that is going to underperform. It's just that's the foundation. It really is this marriage of people, processes, and technology. You can't force the technology to meet every one of your needs. You can, but it's expensive and it's risky. And you don't want to do it the other way. You don't want to take all your processes and force them into default processing that the technology can handle. It's the management of bringing those together, the collaboration or the collaboration between those, and fine tuning, bringing them the right amount for each side to get the maximum amount of the technology and ensuring you achieve the objective of the business model.
Yeah, that's a really important insight, I think. I do want to touch on partner selection briefly. Michael, from your experience, how important is partner selection when designing or evolving a centralized payments and in-house banking model? Are there anything that you could point to that actually makes a difference over that long-term journey?
Yeah, I think Peter took all my thunder there, because I think the ending to his statement was really aligned with what I've experienced and what I would say here. This topic is critical. It's absolutely critical. And the way I would look at this is, I've had discussions with IT resources in the past where they have said, tell us what you want. Okay, we can configure anything. Tell us what you want. And the reality is, that's not where I am. Where I am is in a very much a greenfield scenario, saying, I don't know what I can have. So I need somebody that can help me understand what the art of the possible is. And I kind of look at it as it's more me saying, tell me what I'm missing, and start a dialogue. And that dialogue starts saying, well, we have this problem over here, but I'm not including it in the project right now because I just don't think there's a solution. That 9 out of 10 times opens a door to say there is, or there's one on the horizon, or you know what, let me take that one back and let's see if we can create a solution for you. So I think along the lines, the reality I've come to understand, with all due respect to people involved, is usually on an IT side, there's a lot of FI resources, and they understand those structures in what it means to our company. But that doesn't translate into the Treasury sphere. And it's really kind of one of those areas where, if I gave you the nightmare scenario, this is what it would be. And it's one that I've seen and maybe even still see today outside of our Treasury space: is a consultant that we have procured something with, and we have another consultant that's supposed to help deliver it, and the two of them together are delivering a subpar solution. The only one that's winning in that scenario are the consultants that are winning money. We aren't getting the solution we need. And so you have to be deliberate and careful in that part. And yes, it is understood that the Treasury space is usually a little bit more expensive. But again, you have to be able to explain why. The art of the possible, in the thought of certain individuals who think they can just build a solution. There's reasons why technology exists today, and in today's working environment, hardcore configuration is the devil's work because it's not nimble. And so that's one of the things you got to keep in mind, is that ability to be able to see what truly is the art of the possible and bring it back for discussion.
And from your perspective, Peter, what separates a productive long-term Treasury transformation partnership from a more transactional technology implementation?
Yeah, I mean, first, Michael's comments, I think, are so spot on. Building on what he said, the real divide is what the partner is optimizing for. So in a transactional implementation, a partner who's focused on transactional implementation, they're optimizing for go live. This particular go live, I'm going to get the go live. I'm going to go live. You're going to say, check, sign off, pay me, and I'm going to leave. And I'm not going to worry about this longer term. In a partnership, longer term, they're optimizing for what Treasury function looks like 5 years from now, 5 years after go live. Because they know that they're going to be coming back. They're going to be the ones who are going to be responsible for answering how did this work or not work, and helping to refine it over time. So it's when you look at that, this shows up in 3 ways, really. First, who's at the design table when you're looking at a partner, when they're participating with you and engaging with you? And Michael talked about the criticality of having someone who can help to guide you in understanding. Who's at the design table? When a partner brings really the senior practitioners with the real depth in both business and technology, which we've discussed is critical, being able to translate between those, and you produce designs that are ambitious, but are also deliverable. It's achievable, right? Not just grandiose plans with no way to achieve that. When you bring a business-only consultant, they come up with grandiose operating models that the technology just can't support because they don't understand the operating model. And when you bring technology-only implementers, then they understand the technology. They build a technology that no one wants to utilize because it doesn't really meet with what the requirements are. The second is whether they're designing from experience or blank sheet. If you have partners that are coming in and saying, hey, let's figure this out. Let's work together and figure something out. That's a red flag. You need partners that are coming to the table, done this 50, 60, 100 times and said, here's the baseline. Let's understand what you have, see how these fit into your model and see where the nuances require us to go different ways or take advantage of this or that. But they've seen all these different implementations, seen all the different variations, and can bring that insight that Michael was talking about that's so necessary in helping someone who doesn't understand the technology understand what they can maximize to get out of it. And the third is the time horizon. What are they accountable to? I mentioned earlier, if you're accountable looking at the long-term optimization and you're talking about what you're going to do 5 years from now and how I, as a partner, might be able to help you, or understanding that I'm going to be there to help you in the future, that makes a difference in the accountability and ultimately what the relationship is going to develop and what's going to come as bear fruit out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's turn to value now, because we want to know where the kind of the success stories of this process are. Michael, let's come to you first, without getting too deep into the operational weeds. What are one or two examples of where Sun Chemicals model has made processes faster, cleaner, or even better controlled?
Sure. I'm going to start at a higher level of that first. Our S4 conversion, I talked about it before, that's on our map right now. And as we're working through that, by our model, we are able to be more nimble, more efficient, and more effective in that whole journey. So without going, as you said, without going too far into the details, business consolidation. We had an acquisition. When we had an acquisition, the amount of time, effort, energy, headcount, other related costs that we had to bring in to manage that was minimized because we were able to absorb it into the structure we had, layering in the structure, the infrastructure, the people, the technology, the processes. So we were able to leverage all those in an absorption of a business and a cost reduction in that absorption. The other thing is it's fraud. Right now it's looking at disbursements. It's saying on the disbursement side, what are we doing when it comes to our controls around what's happening upstream? So who's changing something in the system? How are we picturing that, capturing it, and making sure that somebody's not being rushed? I have a call yesterday. The message is we have urgent vendor adjustments that are required, and they're required within 2 hours. And I said, well, they're not going to get them within 2 hours. That mentality resides upstream, and it's a risk downstream. So we're able to put a cap on the back end of that. So through upgrades, transitions, and I go back to a lot of this, which is the people side. I have a team that works for us, and we have to keep them safe. That is the number one responsibility as a leader in an organization. Yes, it's to deliver profits. Yes, it's to do all those other things, but it's to keep your employees, your staff, your teams safe. And the controls and procedures we've built in on our global disbursement process keeps our people safe to do their job and to not be at risk, so that when we have that old school years ago phone call after an acquisition and somebody goes, you need to make this payment, the field was ready to do it. They were panicked until they kept all the way through to us and they said, well, we're going to have this huge problem and no product if we don't have this done. That's enough. Close the call, be done. And it's interesting when you see that and you can wrap that around a safety factor of the employee, because now they stand with confidence, knowledge, and they're more engaged.
Great point, Michael. Thank you. And good practical advice there as well. Rohan, you've described Treasury moving from a cost function to more of a value driver. So where does centralization help Treasury really demonstrate that value?
Look, one of the big advantages of centralization is visibility of data. And that visibility of data is key. And I'll give you a few areas where it could be a differentiating factor. Number one is, as you have visibility of cash flows, you can provide actionable insights to the CFO and to the business partners on how the cash flows are trending vis-a-vis the quarterly target or yearly targets of free cash flow, and what actions needs to be taken to change course if they are not tracking in line with what your expectations are. That is a absolutely incredible insight that Treasury, who is day in, day out in that bank statement and the bank data and the payment, is well suited in the organization to provide, and which traditionally has not been one of the Treasury's functions. That's one. Second is that this data, especially with the new AI tools which are coming in, and we are experimenting with a couple of as well, and I can talk about it. But with the new AI tools which is coming in, this data is going to be a gold mine for those tools to go and deliver the next level of analytics. So insights on fraud, insights on payment screening, insights on operational trending of spends with vendors, right? Those are, and we have a few pilots going on which are actually able to do some of this and provide, and more importantly, using the historical pattern of these data and giving us a forecast to cash forecast, which is one of the big problems Treasury has, and one of the big problems most of the company has, right? Because till you have that data, it's very hard for you to, if you don't have that, it's very hard for any AI tool to go and provide you the value add that you need. So I think that's the key here. That's one of the things that we are attempting on our side as well. The more access we can have to this data, the more outcomes we can drive with the visibility of that data.
Thanks, Rohan. And Christine, I know that Chevron's model supports a broad global payment footprint across multiple currencies, regions, and different payment methods. So what does centralization give you in terms of visibility, control, and consistency at that scale?
Yeah, so Rohan touched upon the visibility. I mean, that's huge for the treasurer to have global cash visibility. I'm going to focus really on from the centralized payment standpoint. Again, it's knowing how much you're paying your vendor. It gives you power when you are negotiating with your vendor on terms, on what they are offering you, because you are paying them this much. When we were in our former system where you just had the vendors in their disparate systems, you couldn't accumulate that data very easily. You now have that visibility with vendors. You have that visibility with your banks. How much are you flowing through this financial institution versus the other? What is it on a daily basis that you need to be able to fund? When is that cash coming in? Can you match it up? Are you going to have to go out, in our case, to the commercial markets and be able to just raise immediate funds? Or are we on the long game? And it could be that we just finance our activities, our capital program through debt, through corporate bonds. So it gives us a lot of tools through centralization to be able to know with deliberation what sort of financing that we need to do from a short-term and to a long-term basis. In terms of, let's see, you asked about controls, and we talked about that a little earlier. Well, and everyone has been bringing up fraud word. I mean, that's key. We have to protect the cash. We have to know that there aren't parties out there who can easily access our bank accounts or even to the employees. Michael, I really enjoyed hearing your point about protecting our people as well. We have these compliance bursts every now and then where you hear about things that, was it a supplier was able to do this because of certain controls? And they teach us that if we don't have a strong control system, it's very easy for that cash to be misappropriated. And we don't want to be, no one here wants to be in the headlines and be that story of where cash went inappropriately. And then finally, you talked about consistency. Consistency is key in standardization, driving down your unit cost. This is a transaction, being able to make a payment. So driving down your unit cost to pennies with the appropriate tech tools. And if I could, I did peek to see about the Q&A. And I saw that there was an individual who asked about blending your payment factory with your ERP system. And because ours is one and the same, and using SAP in-house cash, and we are migrating over to advanced payment management as the tool itself has become adopted in the marketplace. We see the blending of the product there allows us to have peace of mind that the cash is going out to the appropriate party. And we also have peace of mind that it's being reflected appropriately in our books. So having that integrated approach in the software and having the right tools, we think is really key, not just actually for our vendors, but at the earlier part in one of your polls, I think one of the questions was about intercompany payments and settlement. And so using the in-house cash product and soon to be advanced payment management, it allows us to what we call the realignment process, where we were able to simplify the consolidation of how our cash moves up the chain, so that when we report out our cash, it's an accurate balance.
Thank you for taking on that question there, Christine, because we're running over. So unfortunately, that is the one question from the audience Q&A that we're able to get to today. Any others that have come in, we'll endeavour to answer offline for you. But I'm keen to wrap on the hour. So let's get into our key takeaways from all of our speakers. Christine, let's just come back to you first in terms of for the Treasury and financial operations team that are kind of looking at their own payment architecture. What is kind of one key takeaway or maybe a call to action that you'd share from your experience?
Okay, well, I'm going to say first, having the right people. That is tantamount to having a successful go live, having the right partner, the system integrator, and the team. But what I'd really like to mention is your first year of go live. Be prepared for a year of transition. It is something that it's a new process for the people between the business users and the IT folks. There's a big learning curve in moving from a system that you've had in place for over 20, in our case, 30 years, to now to S/4HANA. So that first year is really growing pains. That's what everyone should expect. And let me pass it over in the interest of time.
Michael, we'll come to you for your key takeaway.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and simple. Stay committed, driven, curious, never settle, and never stop thinking about why can't we, and asking that question. I think that should be on the forefront. Aside from talent, yes, you have to have the right people around you. Why can't we? And never stop being curious.
And Rohan, a final thought from you?
Two quick things. One, going back to the beginning, before you make a decision on centralization, link it back to your overall business strategy and the operating model. Those two things go hand in hand. However, for us, we are realizing this. One of the key is having central visibility of cash flows. That is going to be crucial in the new age of AI. You would not be able to do and use a lot of AI tools available if you do not have the data all centrally available and visible to you.
Great point there. And Peter, take us home with a final thought.
Yeah, I would say that the teams that build genuinely industry-leading solutions in this space are not necessarily the ones with the best technology platform or the boldest operating model. They're the ones that treated those two as a single design problem from day one. The hard part isn't choosing the technology or the model, really. It's the discipline to keep shaping them against each other early before they've hardened, before one has hardened, really leveraging the commonality between them and the impacts across them. So the companies that get this right are deliberate about that from the very beginning, from the beginning conversation. And so whatever stage you're at right now, I would say, do not let the operating model and the technology be designed on separate tracks. That alignment done early is what separates average outcomes from truly market leading ones.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to Christine, Michael, Rohan, and Peter for providing such great insights on the subject today. And thank you all for joining us at this TMI webinar. Do join us again in a couple of weeks for our next webinar, looking at where AI is making the greatest impacts across Treasury. So some themes from today will be carried into that, I bet. You can sign up for that at the TMI website. But as far as today is concerned, thank you again and goodbye.
Great conversation.